Ever feel like you're stuck waiting for a life to actually, like, begin? You know, like you're constantly scrolling through those picture-perfect Instagram feeds and you're thinking, when's it gonna be my turn? When do I get my highlight reel? Well, today we're taking a deep dive into that whole idea of waiting, especially those post-grad years. We're going deep on the concept of patience, looking at it through the lens of, well, the Bible, and also a modern story that I think a lot of you will relate to.
Sounds intriguing.
So let's start with Maya. She's fresh out of college, crazy talented when it comes to, like, all things digital marketing, but the job hunt.
Yeah, not exactly a walk in the park. She's facing rejection after rejection, and it's tough, you know,
Yeah.
especially when it seems like everyone else is out there like launching these amazing careers and living their best lives. I'm sure some of you get it.
Oh, absolutely. That feeling of being in limbo, of being stuck, is something so many young adults experience. It's interesting, though, because the Bible actually addresses this feeling of being stuck, and it frames it in a really unexpected way, often using this metaphor of a vineyard. Okay, I'm listening. Vineyards, patience. Break it down for us.
So think about a vineyard for a second. You don't just like plant a vine and boom, instant grapes, right? It takes time, serious effort, cultivating the soil, tending to the vines, and having faith in the process, even when you can't see those juicy grapes just yet.
Right. It's active, not passive, like you're taking care of something that needs time to grow.
Exactly. And patience, much like tending a vineyard, it's about way more than just waiting around. It's about trusting God's timing, which, let's be real, rarely seems to match our own, am I right? It's so important that it's actually listed as a fruit of the Spirit in the Bible, Galatians 5:22.
Whoa, I didn't realize it was important. So it's not about just sitting back and crossing your fingers, hoping for the best.
Not at all. It's about trusting that there's something happening beneath the surface, even if we can't see those results just yet. And this is where Maya's story takes a really interesting turn.
Okay, tell me more, because it's easy to see how Maya could have just spiraled, right? But she didn't. Instead, she comes across this quote, and it really resonated with her. It said, "Just because you can't see the fruit doesn't mean the seed isn't growing." It's like she had this aha moment where she realized, hold on, this waiting period, this is my time to grow.
Yes, and that's exactly what she did. Instead of getting lost in a sea of job rejections, she decided to take control. She enrolled in online courses to sharpen her skills. She started volunteering for causes she cared about. And get this, she even started a blog, sharing her thoughts on creativity and faith. She was literally cultivating her own vineyard in a way.
So instead of just hitting refresh on job boards all day, Maya was becoming the person her future employer needed. That takes a whole other level of, like, self-awareness. That's a whole other aspect of patience, isn't it?
100%. And honestly, her story really reminds me of some of those classic stories from the Bible. Abraham and Sarah waiting decades to have a child, Joseph going through some really tough times before rising to power. These stories, they're not just ancient history. They remind us that God often uses these seasons of waiting to bring about incredible growth, to get us ready for what's next, you know?
I like that. It's like those behind-the-scenes documentaries, the work that goes on behind the scenes. It may not always be glamorous, but it's so essential to that final product. It's like God's doing all this work behind the scenes in our lives, even when we feel like nothing's happening.
Exactly. And sometimes the behind-the-scenes work, it involves a concept called pruning.
Pruning. Okay, so the first time I heard about pruning, I was like, wait, what? Why would you cut back something that's already producing? It just didn't make any sense to me.
It seems counterintuitive, right? But in a vineyard, when you prune away certain branches, even the healthy ones, it actually leads to a much larger harvest in the long run.
So you're saying it's about removing something good for something even better, but how does that apply to us, you know, in our everyday lives?
Well, think about it like this. Sometimes God might allow challenges to come into our lives. Maybe it's a job loss or a relationship ending. And it's not that he's trying to punish us, but rather these challenges, they're like pruning. He's removing things that might be hindering our growth, things that are holding us back from something greater.
So, like, when Maya didn't get that dream job right away, maybe that was a form of pruning. Like God was saying, I've got something even more amazing in store for you, Maya, but you need to go through this period of learning and growth first.
Exactly. It's about trusting that he has a plan, a bigger picture in mind, even when we can't see it yet.
Wow. Okay, that's a lot to unpack. But before we get too deep in the weeds here, let's switch gears just a bit. We've been talking about patience in the context of waiting, but What about those moments in the Bible where things seem to happen instantly, like those miracles that Jesus performed? Was there any patience involved in those situations at all?
That's a great question. And, it's easy to assume those miracles were just like instantaneous. But even in those situations, there was something really important required from the people involved, faith. And faith, it often goes hand in hand with patience.
Oh, okay. I see where you're going with this. It's like, even though Jesus had the power to do these amazing things, the people he healed, they still had to trust him, to have faith in that moment, right?
Exactly. Like, think about the story of Jesus healing the blind man. The blind man, he couldn't physically see Jesus's power, but he still chose to believe in it. Or when Jesus calmed the storm to the disciples, they were terrified, right?
Yeah.
And Jesus even asked them, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" It's like he was reminding them that even when everything seems chaotic and uncertain, peace comes from trusting in something bigger than ourselves.
Wow, yeah. So even when it looks like God's working super fast, like instantly, there's still this element of trust and surrender that we have to embrace. It's not just something that happens to us, we have a part to play.
100%. That active trust, that willingness to let go, it's a huge part of what patience is all about. It's like saying, God, I might not understand what you're doing or why things are happening this way, but I trust you. And honestly, that kind of surrender, it can be so freeing.
It's like taking off a backpack that's full of rocks,
Yeah.
All that pressure, that need to control everything, to have all the answers. Letting go of that can be, well, kind of a game changer. But I've got to say, sometimes the hardest person to be patient with is, well, ourselves.
Oh, tell me about it. We can be so hard on ourselves, setting these impossible standards, beating ourselves up over every little mistake. But what if we tried something radical? What if we treated ourselves with the same compassion and grace that we offer to a close friend?
Okay, that's a big one. And I think it's especially relevant after college. Think about it. You're figuring out your career path, navigating relationships, maybe even just trying to figure out who you are now as an adult. It's a lot. And it's so easy to get down on yourself when things get tough.
Exactly. And in those moments, that's where self-compassion, and I kind of see it as a close cousin to patience, becomes so crucial. It's about recognizing that you're human, that you're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. It's not about beating yourself up, but about embracing the journey, even the messy parts.
It's like, imagine you're learning a new language, right?
Sure.
You're going to mess up the grammar. You're going to have those moments where you just totally blank on the vocabulary. But you keep practicing. You celebrate those little victories along the way. You're patient with the process, right?
Precisely. We wouldn't dream of berating a friend for stumbling through their Spanish verbs. So why are we so quick to do that to ourselves when it comes to, say, our career goals or our relationships? It's about celebrating the progress, not striving for this unattainable perfection.
And this totally connects back to Maya's story, right? Like, if she had been super hard on herself after each job rejection, if she'd gotten stuck in that cycle of self-criticism, she never would have had the energy or the motivation to create that blog or start volunteering.
Exactly. Self-compassion, it frees us up to keep moving forward, to keep growing, even when things get tough. And, there's another piece to this whole patience puzzle that I think is so important, the power of community. We weren't designed to do life alone.
Oh, I'm all ears. Tell me more about that.
Well, think about it. When we try to muscle through life solo, when we rely solely on our own strength and willpower, we're actually limiting our own growth. But when we choose to surround ourselves with supportive, encouraging people who get us, it's like we unlock this superpower.
There's got that saying, right? If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. But building those strong connections, those truly meaningful relationships, that takes time. Intentionality. It doesn't just happen overnight.
You got it. It takes effort. Showing up consistently for the people in our lives, being present, being willing to be vulnerable, to share not just our highlight reel, but also our struggles, our victories, the whole messy, beautiful thing.
And that requires patience too, right? Because relationships, they can be messy. There are going to be miscommunications, disagreements, times when we feel like throwing in the towel.
Absolutely. And it's in those moments when we want to give up that patience becomes like this muscle that we have to flex. It's about choosing to see things from the other person's perspective, remembering that everyone is fighting their own battles, everyone's on their own unique timeline. It's about extending grace, both to ourselves and to the people around us.
It's like making a conscious choice to focus on the good, even when it's hard, even when it would be easier to just focus on the negative, because let's face it, we're all works in progress, right?
Precisely. And that leads us to another really powerful practice that can help us cultivate patience. Gratitude. It's so easy to get caught up in the negativity, to focus on what's wrong, what we lack, what we wish we had. But when we make a conscious effort to shift our perspective, to focus on what we do have, to find those things, big or small, that we can be grateful for, it's like this breath of fresh air for our soul.
So true. Like even on those crazy hectic days, I can always find something to be grateful for. My morning coffee, a good podcast, a funny text from a friend. Those little things, they really do make a difference.
They absolutely do. And gratitude, it's not about ignoring the hard stuff, pretending like everything's perfect. It's about choosing to see the good alongside the bad. Find those glimmers of hope and joy, even in the midst of challenging circumstances.
It really is like retraining your brain to look for the good, even when it feels like everything is going wrong. But how do you actually do that? Is there like a secret formula or something?
A gratitude journal can be surprisingly powerful. Just taking a few minutes every day to write down things you're thankful for, even small things, it can really shift your perspective over time.
Yeah, I can see that. Instead of dwelling on your to-do list, all the things you didn't get to, you're focusing on the good, right? No matter how big or small.
Exactly. And this circles back to patience, because sometimes it's those small things, those little moments of gratitude that keep us going when the big picture feels overwhelming. It's about playing the long game,
Speaking of long games, we've got to talk about prayer.
Yeah.
It's so easy to get caught up in trying to do everything ourselves, to figure it all out on our own, but tapping into something bigger, something beyond ourselves, that's got to require a whole other level of patience.
Absolutely. And the beautiful thing about prayer is that it's not about having the perfect words or saying all the right things. It's about connection. It's about coming to God just as we are, admitting that we don't have it all figured out, and trusting that He's listening even when it feels silent. And that takes surrender, which is, at its core, deeply connected to patience.
It's like realizing you can't, bench press a car on your own. You need some extra strength, some outside help. But that can be tough, right?
Yeah.
Letting go of control.
For sure, it can be humbling. But honestly, that's where the peace comes in, surrendering our plans, our timelines, our need to control everything to a God who sees the bigger picture, the things we can't even fathom. And again, it's not about being passive. It's about actively choosing to say, okay, God, I trust you, even when I don't understand.
And that trust, that's where faith comes in, right? It's not about having all the answers, but about believing, even when it's hard, even when we can't see the way forward.
Yes. It's like we talked about earlier with those incredible miracles that Jesus performed, those instantaneous healings. They still required faith from the people involved. It was a choice, an active decision to believe in something bigger than themselves, even when they couldn't see the outcome yet.
It's kind of like that feeling when you jump off a diving board, There's that split second of uncertainty, that moment of free fall before you hit the water. But you trust, you have faith that the water's going to be there to catch you.
Exactly. And just like with that dive, the more we practice faith, the more we step out in trust, the more natural it becomes. We build up that trust muscle, that faith muscle over time.
Wow, we have covered some serious ground today. From vineyards to diving boards, who knew patience could be so adventurous? But really, it strikes me that patience isn't just about waiting for something to happen. It's about how we show up in the waiting. It's about who we're becoming in those in-between spaces.
That's such a good point. It's about being present, being kind to ourselves, nurturing those meaningful relationships, practicing gratitude, connecting with God through prayer. These are all ways that we actively participate in our own growth while we wait.
So it's not a matter of if we find ourselves in a season of waiting, but how we choose to wait. Are we cultivating a garden, tending to the soil, planting seeds of hope? Or are we letting the weeds grow, letting discouragement take root?
I love that analogy. And just like tending a garden takes time, dedication, and yes, a whole lot of patience, so too does cultivating a life of purpose, a life that's meaningful and joy-filled, a life that truly reflects who we were created to be.
And sometimes that means embracing the messy, the unpredictable, the unknown, trusting that God is orchestrating things behind the scenes, even when we can't see the full picture. And when it gets tough, when those doubts start to creep in, remembering that we're not alone in this journey. We've got this incredible community, the support system to cheer us on, to pick us up when we fall, and to remind us of just how strong and capable we truly are.
Beautifully said. And to our amazing listener, as you navigate the ups and downs of post-grad life, as you chase those dreams and face those inevitable challenges, please remember you are not alone. Embrace the journey, practice patience, be kind to yourself, and never, ever underestimate the power of small steps taken with intention.
Couldn't have said it better myself. To our incredible listener, thank you for diving deep with us today. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.